Hey, it's Jeff Zito, and thanks for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. Number 2 on the Apple Podcast Music Interviews chart. Past guests and episodes are online at celebrityjobber.com. Streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, would love a 5-star rating, and leave a review. It's like one big break could change your life, and that is exactly what happened to my guest this week, Gary Hoey. He had a hit song on the radio right when I first got into the radio business in the mid-90s. It was a cover, Hocus Pocus from the band Focus. But like how he got to this place is truly an incredible story that we're gonna hear about shortly. And we'll talk about his first jobs before he was even in the music business and some of the other jobs he has today. But the story, the big break, man, it's a pretty cool story. He's guitarist Gary Hoey and my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
I guess I first heard of Gary Hoey when I was working at WYNF in Sarasota, Florida. Maybe it was Hocus Pocus, which, was probably around the mid-90s, 94, 95, something like that was when I first heard of you. And all these years later, still rocking and rolling, brother.
Thank you, man. I know it's crazy to think that, that was a song 30 years ago. We put it out, and somehow I've managed to stay in this crazy business, rocking and rolling. It's amazing. Now,
let me start off by asking you, Gary, are you from a musical family?
It's interesting you should say that. I wouldn't say so much like there wasn't like instruments laying around or anything, but my mom was a big music fan. So my mom was always playing records and singing in the kitchen, cooking food, and she grew up like kind of dancing and doing different things, kind of in the entertainment sort of world. Like she did some ballet. She would do baton in the parade and dance. And my mom was a kind of a character, an entertainer in her own right.
Right. So what about mom and dad for actual jobs? What did they do for a living growing up?
Growing up, well, we grew up in a mill town, Lowell, Massachusetts. We grew up, in a pretty rough sort of town. But my dad was actually a cab driver. He mostly drove a cab. Then he started a roofing company where him and my brother did some roofing and stuff. And my mom was a stay-home mom. My mom just raised six of us kids at the house as long as I can remember.
Wow, that's a big job. 6 kids. How many boys? How many girls?
I have four sisters and a brother. 4 sisters and a brother.
Wow. Yeah. So tell me, you grew up in Mass, in Lowell, which is, pretty blue collar town, pretty rough growing up. But what was it about guitar? When did you get into guitar, and what was it that got you interested in guitar?
I was a teenager, and music was a great thing for me because it kind of saved me. It kind of grabbed me and just gave me something to really focus on. And but what happened was I wish I could say, Jimi Hendrix or the Beatles came on, the Ed Sullivan Show. But it was really one of my sisters was dating a guy that played the guitar. And he came and sat at the kitchen table and just started playing like 3 feet in front of me. And I was mesmerized. I was hooked. And I'm like, you got to teach me how to play the guitar, and I got real excited.
So what did you think growing up? Okay, so you start playing guitar because your sister's boyfriend introduced you to it. But what did you think when you were going to get older, when you were in high school? Did you think about college? Were you thinking about, what you were going to do for a living? Did you automatically, when you became introduced to the guitar, did you know this is what your path was going to be?
I did, actually. I knew by the time I was probably 16 years old, I knew that this is what I was going to be doing for my life. And I told my mom, I said I want to drop out of high school. I dropped out of high school in the 10th grade and was in a band, and I went and got my GED and then just started playing in bands. I said, and my mom was like, well, if you're going to get out of high school, all I was doing was playing in bands. She's like, if you're going to leave school, you have to make money. You can't just be a bum. That's what I remember her saying that.
You're not floundering around this house, eating this food, just having fun. You got to start making some money. Yeah. Sure.
Money. So my mom, I was a guitar player, just playing, making hardly any money, bumming around. My mom literally, it's in some of my songs. My mom told me when I was 17, she's like, you're out. You need to go make a living and you need to go figure it out. So I left home when I was 17 and got a part-time job and started playing in bands and that was it.
Celebrity Jobber. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
What, did you have a job other than playing guitar? Were you making money at some point, like maybe your first job? What was it?
I was working. I mean, I had the typical, paper route and all those kind of jobs, but I remember working because we were living in a, industrial, right on the river, mill town. And I worked in everything from shoe shops, literally, not even lying, putting soles on the bottom of shoes, gluing them on. Someone said that's why I have so much soul. And then I worked for Wayne Computers. I was doing on the line. I was doing like computer boards and inspecting circuit boards, and then I became a supervisor. I'll never forget this. I became a supervisor, and then I was playing guitar, and I got a chance to audition for Ozzy Osbourne, and they were going to fly me to Los Angeles to try out for Ozzy.
Where were we in a time frame here? Like, about what year are we talking about?
This was in the 80s, probably 86, 87. I went out to LA to try out for Ozzy, so I was 26 years old.
And how did you find out Ozzy's looking for a guitar? How did that whole thing happen?
I was sitting home playing my guitar, the biggest fan of Ozzy, and I all of a sudden the radio came on and I heard this British bumbling accent, and it was Ozzy on an interview in Boston, BCN, saying, I'm looking for a guitarist.
You're kidding me. Wow.
No, I dialed the radio station. This is a true story. I dialed the station. I still had a phone with the curly cord on it, and I threw it on the ground and I went... and I started playing Ozzy riffs over the phone. And the guy on the phone said, there's somebody on the phone that wants to audition for Ozzy, and he sounds pretty good.
You got to be kidding me. This is an insane story.
It's a true story, and I gave them my information. They gave me a number and an address, and I sent a cassette tape. It was a cassette to Los Angeles, and it had some demos and me playing. And I got a call 2 weeks later that we're flying you to Los Angeles to try out for Ozzy Osbourne.
You got to be kidding me. This is an unbelievable story. So this basically happened with you just listening to the radio one afternoon. Ozzy just happens to be on, and he says, I'm looking for a guitar player. You called in, you got through, you started playing riffs live on the air, and Ozzy hears it and says, hey, I want you to fly out to Los Angeles. I mean, so you fly out to Los Angeles. Tell me what happens.
Yeah, I fly out there and I get the audition songs that I have to do. They let me know. I get prepared. I fly out there and I get off the plane. There's a guy waiting for me with my name on a thing, and I get in. He's waiting with a limousine outside. I've never been in a limo in my life.
It's like a movie, right?
It's like a movie, man. And I'm in this limousine and I'm flying down Sunset Boulevard. I've never seen California in my life, palm trees and everything. And he's driving kind of fast, and we're whipping around the roads, and I'm getting there, and I'm like, this is incredible. And I walk in, and there's a hallway with 20 guitar players all lined up with long hair and leather jackets. It's a cattle call. Like, they all look like me, and I'm like, this is crazy. And I get to go in the room, and I actually play with Ozzy. He comes in the room, and we're playing I Don't Know and Crazy Train, and he's talking to me, and I'm just in awe. I can't even believe that I'm standing here. And the amplifier they had me play through, the Marshall stacks, were so loud. I'd never heard anything so loud in my life. When I hit a chord, it almost knocked me on the ground. It was incredible.
This is right around the time that Zakk Wylde became the guitarist of Ozzy, so I don't want to, jump the story and say you didn't get the gig, but what happened from here?
Well, what happened was it turned out to change my entire life, because getting the audition with Ozzy and getting to Hollywood and experiencing that and knowing I had talent, I knew I worked hard, I had talent, that Ozzy literally said to me, if you don't get the gig, because they called me back for a second day. I came back a second day. So I knew they were taking a hard look at me. And then I played again. And then the second day, Ozzy said, if you get the gig or you don't, you need to move to Los Angeles. You need to come here. And so I got home. I found out I didn't get the gig. It was Zakk Wylde, which made total sense. He was perfect. But I came home and I sold everything I had, and I got in a U-Haul and I drove across the country to California. I listened to what Ozzy said, and I went there and I found a manager, and I signed with Warner Brothers Records, and my career took off, and I believe I owe it to Ozzy.
I believe that had to be, that's like when you ask somebody what their big break was, right? And a lot of people, they'll say like, gradually I worked up. That happens a lot. Hard work pays off, and gradually they make it. In your circumstance, do you consider that whole situation, that whole story had to be your big break, right?
I think it was. I think it was my big break, because I'm a kid in a mill town in Lowell. Who do I know in Los Angeles to get an audition with a big gig? I don't know anybody. I don't have a manager. I don't have a publicist. I don't have anybody. I just have my talent. And I had the balls to pick up the phone and play over the phone. And I had the balls to fly to Los Angeles and do the audition, which was very scary. And it taught me a lot just going through that experience. It aged me, by doing it, because you learn so much.
You had the guitar in the amp hooked up and ready to go, just like you are right now?
I did. I had a practice amp, just sitting on the floor, and I had my guitar there, and I was always playing. And when I heard it on the radio, I don't even know what possessed me to call up and say, I'm just going to play over the radio.
Right.
I mean, who would do?
I know. Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean,
the Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. Celebrity Jobber.
If that never happened, Gary, I mean, you ever think about if you never picked up the phone and you never called the radio station and played for Ozzy on the radio? I mean, have you ever just kind of like one day reflected back to your life and said, man, if I didn't make that call, this maybe I'd be in a local band or just doing something completely different?
A very good point. I think there's a good chance if I didn't pick up that phone that my life would definitely not have taken the turn that it did, and the opportunities that came from it. And I also think of the other side of the coin is, what if they said, guess what? You are the new guitarist for Ozzy Osbourne.
Right.
I've also thought about that and how my life would have changed if that had happened. Would I still have had 2 kids living in the woods of New Hampshire, where my kids know who I am and my wife knows who I am and we have amazing relationships? Or would I be divorced and my kids wouldn't know who I am? Yeah, I just wonder, like, where would I be? And I've thought about that. And if I didn't pick up the phone, so much wouldn't have happened. And it taught me for the rest of my life, when a moment comes where you can seize an opportunity and you can put yourself out there, do it. Because the worst that can happen is somebody says no, which could still turn into an opportunity.
That's true. I never really thought about that. And I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day. Like, nobody owes you anything. If you want something bad enough, you got to go out there and get it. And you can. But don't be the guy that's like, woe is me, nothing good ever happens to me, when you're not ever taking a chance and going outside of your comfort zone to try to make your dream happen, which you tried to do. It didn't work out with Ozzy, but it did work out. He gave you the advice, hey, move to L.A. You did. And one by one, all these things started happening. Unbelievable. It's a great story, Gary. And I mean, like I said, I started in my career back in the early to mid 90s at a station called WYNF in Sarasota, Florida. And I remember it was the song Hocus Pocus from Gary Hoey that got me familiar with you, which was an old cover of the Focus song, correct?
Yes, it was an old song by Focus. And again, that was just a vehicle for me to let people hopefully hear what else I was doing. I wanted to do a great cover song and have some fun. And, and in life, I mean, all the opportunities that we take, I tell my son this now, who's playing in my band, I tell him, when you're out doing something, you never know what opportunities are going to come, and you've got to keep yourself open in life to making relationships and connecting with people. And I tell them, when you meet somebody, don't be afraid to say, hey, can I get your phone number? Can we stay in touch? I'd love to stay in touch. And it could be Brian May from Queen. It could be. It doesn't matter.
Right.
You can still
You're right. No, it's important. It's so important, and I think it's a good lesson for anybody. Just you never know who that person is that you run into. And I guess it goes back to another. It goes back to I don't know if it's a saying or not, but don't be a dick. In life, you never know who you're going to meet. You maintain good relationships with people, or you definitely you have a chance. You never know who you're going to meet along the way, and your story is definitely one that I'll never forget.
Celebrity Jobber. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
And still to this day, Gary, you're still touring, full schedule. You got new music coming out, I understand.
Yes, we just released a new album, Avalanche. Yeah, I'm still making new music. I'm touring with my son. He's in my band now. Life is really good, man. I'm still feeding my kids on rock and roll. And I talk about taking chances and getting out there. And the relationships you make with people are really what's going to get you where you need to go. Because people want to hang out with people that they like, But it's also, you have to survive in this business. You have to be diversified. Like, I'm a teacher. I'm a mentor. I'm a guitar player. I'm a producer. I'm an engineer. I'll valet cars. I do whatever it takes to feed my family. And so I think in any business, you gotta don't look at yourself as one dimensional. Find out other things that you're good at, and don't just look for a hand up for yourself. Give other people a hand up. I always love to work with young musicians and mentor them, and give them some help.
So Gary, you're talking about all these other jobs that you have still to this day within the music business. You're not only performing, putting out new albums, you're also a producer, an engineer. Tell me about all the different jobs you have within the music business.
Yeah, I started messing with the knobs and becoming an engineer many, many years ago. People would leave the studio, and I would hang around with, Thompson Barbiero, Richie Zito, Tom, all these amazing producers that I got to work with, and I would hang around and ask them questions and try to learn about the tricks of the trade. And so I ended up becoming a producer. I produced Lita Ford's last record, we just did another record together. And I've worked with Ricky Lee Jones. I've worked with Tom Waits. I've worked with Jewel. I've worked with so many people. And again, being in the studio with people, you have to bring the best out of people as a producer. So that's what I do. I'm good at helping people to feel comfortable when they're in the studio. And when I'm not working, sometimes I'm creating for ESPN Sports. If I'm not on tour, I'm writing for Disney. I have songs in several movies, Danny DeVito, Deck the Halls, Beethoven, the dog movie. And so I've survived for 30 years by not just doing one thing. I'm a pretty diverse person.
On June 18th in St. Petersburg, you're playing with Lou Gramm, the original lead singer of Foreigner, Lou Gramm's All-Stars. That's going on at the Palladium in St. Pete, and that's on June 18th. Tell me a little bit about the Lou Gramm's All-Stars.
Yeah, it's great working with Lou. It's funny because I love Foreigner. I grew up on the music, and 30 years ago, when Hocus Pocus came out, my first hit song, I ended up opening up for Foreigner and the Doobie Brothers. I was the opening band, so I got to tour for 6 weeks with Lou and hang out and, get to hear him. And we became kind of friends, we hung out. And then I didn't see him for a few years. And then we started doing some things together with Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp where he would come in as a guest. And then I did some cruises where he was on there. So we kept running into each other. And then my friend Tony Franklin plays bass for him, the Fretless Monster, and called me one day and said, Lou's looking for a guitar player to fill in for some dates. Would you want to do it? And I said, yeah, I would love to, and came down, and we really hit it off. And so Lou's been using me for most of the shows at this point, and as much as I can do.
Man, new album is out. It's called Avalanche, GaryHoey.com. That's Gary, HOEY.com. find out more about where Gary's performing, his music. You could buy his new CD, Avalanche. Gary, I got to tell you, man, great story, and was so glad to finally get a chance to talk to you after all these years. I know that my old buddies Stan and Haney used to have you on their show all the time, but I never had an opportunity to speak to you before, so I was glad I finally got a chance to hook up.
Me too, man. I'm so glad that we did get to talk. And Stan and Haney were really cool guys, man. So many years. I think your show's off the air now, right?
It is. They just retired back in last August.
Well, legendary guys. And a funny story is my mother lived in Fort Myers, and when I came down, I came to see her and see them, and she made them a big thing of lasagna with some salad and garlic bread, and I brought it to them, and they talked about that for 10 years, man.
Yeah, they usually don't eat listener food, but I think your mother's cooking was a different story altogether. So,
but great to chat with you, man. I wish you a great summer, and hopefully in the fall, I'll have some new holiday music. Maybe we can chat again.
Awesome, Gary. Thanks so much, man.
You too. Have a great day, Jeff. Thank you.
Maybe not the most recognizable name, Gary Hoey, but you see that big break. Hearing Ozzy on the radio in Boston, he calls the station, starts playing guitar on the phone. Just so happens that Ozzy's looking for a guitar player. They fly him out to L.A. Unfortunately, he doesn't get the gig, but he said that experience changed his life because Ozzy said, whether you get it or don't, you got to move out here to Los Angeles. This is where all the gigs are. So what I took from that whole story is, it could have been a sad story, right? Like, I didn't get the gig, but it wasn't a sad story. Just because he didn't get the gig, it didn't end. He did move to Los Angeles. Doors did open. Signed a record deal with Warner Brothers. Had a hit song on the radio, Hocus Pocus. It led to not only a career of, music and performing music live, but behind the scenes stuff. He's a producer, and he's worked with Lita Ford and Jewel, and he does some sound design projects and has written stuff for Disney. So you see how this whole thing did work out for Gary Hoey. If you're in the Tampa St. Pete area, Gary performing with the original singer of Foreigner, Lou Gramm, at the Palladium. That's Wednesday, June 18th. See if I can hit Gary up on Twitter, see if he'll give me a pair of tickets to that gig. Think I'd like to go. Talked about his first jobs outside of music. He was resoling shoes. Also inspected some circuit boards for computers. Both those jobs don't sound very exciting, so really glad that the whole music thing worked out for Gary, man. What a story. Thank you so much for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. Streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe. Would love a 5-star rating and leave a review. You can check out past episodes online, celebrityjobber.com. Number 2 on Apple Podcasts Music Interviews chart. You can also follow online at youtube.com/the@celebrityjobber or on IG, celebrity_jobber_podcast. This is definitely one of the most exciting stories I've heard in a long time. And even though he didn't get the gig, Zakk Wylde got the gig for Ozzy Osbourne, who, by the way, is retiring June 5th, his very last gig in his hometown of Birmingham in the UK. And Gary didn't get the gig, but it still worked out and still putting out new music and performing. And he has a lot to be proud of, Gary Hoey. Everybody's got a story and got some great celebs lined up for the future. We'll get to hear their stories coming up right here on the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm Jeff Zito.